What's worse than Antifa? Antifa with press passes and police badges and law degrees. Just when you think that no one can possibly be more cowardly than the beached jellyfish who run all of the main social media platforms, a British judge bursts through the door and says, "Hold my cup of Earl Grey." The BBC reports, Tommy Robinson has been jailed for 9 months over contempt of court. There are no words to describe how much contempt I have for your courts, Great Britain. The ex-English Defence League leader was found guilty last week of interfering with the trial of a sexual grooming gang at Leeds Crown Court in May 2018. Name one way he interfered in the trial. Can't be done because he didn't. Two Old Bailey total loser judges said his Facebook Live video of defendants in the trial had encouraged vigilante action. Vigilante action. That's the new one. When Tommy was originally arrested, police said they were arresting him for breach of peace. That didn't work, so the media reported that he had been arrested for violating reporting restrictions. The problem here was that the courts never posted that there were any reporting restrictions, and even if they had, under British law, the courts can't restrict sharing information that's already in the public domain. And that's the only information Tommy shared. So that wasn't going to work either. More recently, the courts announced that by questioning the gang rapists on their way to court, Tommy ran the risk of causing them anxiety. Unfortunately for the Oscar Mayer judges peddling this baloney, questioning people on their way to court isn't against the law. If it is, why do reporters do it all the time? And finally, we have the latest accusation. Tommy was encouraging vigilante action. We'll see what the judges mean by vigilante action in a moment. The BBC continues. A social media account in Robinson's name called the sentence an absolute joke, absolutely correct, and said it was time to protest, absolutely correct again. Outside the London court, supporters of Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, booed as news of his sentence reached them. The crowd marched towards the Old Bailey chanting, "We want Tommy out," before some began pelting police with bottles and cans. As a prison van thought to contain Robinson drove away, several supporters shouted, "We love you, Tommy." Some of his supporters then moved towards Parliament, where there were reports of journalists being verbally abused and physically intimidated. Poor journalists, if they could only imagine what it would be like to be sent to prison for reporting the news. City of London police said officers arrested at least 3 people. I only know one thing about the protesters who were arrested. They will be treated much, much worse by police, prosecutors, and judges than members of the Islamic rape gangs are treated. During the 2018 case at Leeds Crown Court, reporting restrictions had been put in place, postponing the publication of any details until the end of a series of linked trials involving 29 defendants. However, Robinson, 36, from Luton, broadcast footage from outside the court on 25th of May 2018 while the jury in the second trial of the series was considering its verdict. The video lasted an hour and a half and was viewed online 250,000 times after being live streamed on Facebook. Notice how British journalists always twist the facts by leaving out important details. They say that there were reporting restrictions in place and that Tommy was broadcasting outside the courthouse. Any reader would assume that he was breaking the law. However, if the BBC were to include the fact that it's perfectly legal to share information that's already in the public domain, and that Tommy only shared information that was already in the public domain, readers would start wondering why he was arrested and thrown in jail. We can't have that, so we'll just leave out those details. In a written ruling, Dame Victoria said Robinson had claimed his intention in making the broadcast was to denounce the media for their behavior. Why would anyone want to denounce the British media who dedicate their entire careers to ruining the lives of men and women who expose Islamic rape gangs? But the judges found he had encouraged others to harass a defendant by finding him, knocking on his door, following him, and watching him. This created a real risk that the course of justice would be seriously impeded, she said. Look at how this is written. Tommy had encouraged others to harass a defendant by finding him, knocking on his door, following him, and watching him. This is the so-called vigilante justice that Tommy was encouraging. If you're reading this BBC article, how would you interpret that claim? You would interpret it to mean that Tommy was on Facebook Live telling his followers to harass members of the rape gang, knock on their doors, follow them, and watch them, right? And that would be vigilante justice, right? Well, if you watched Tommy's live stream, you know what he actually said. He said that British journalists routinely harass people like him, knock on their doors, follow them around, and so on, but they don't do that to members of rape gangs. Tommy mentioned a 23-year-old man who was the leader of a group called Generation Identity. He worked as a city banker. When the media found out where he worked, they posted a picture of him. They posted where he worked, where he went to school, who his parents were, where his parents worked, all with the clear goal of having this young man and his family harassed over his political views. Tommy's point to the media was that if they believe it's acceptable to harass people like this, why do they tiptoe around pedophile rape gangs? He was calling out their hypocrisy. If it's okay to stalk and harass people over their political views, why wouldn't you stalk and harass people over gang-raping little girls? In other words, journalists treat their political opponents worse than they treat pedophile rapists. Here's what Tommy said in context.
Kaylin's been sitting since 5 o'clock this morning when we left, editing a video that will go up today, which is an interview with the leader of the joint leader of Generation Identity. And I met him because the newspapers this week, I read headlines that said Heil Hipster. Heil Hipster, like Heil Hitler. So I thought, who's this man? And then one of them said, meet the new chilling face of fascism. I've seen all these sort of headlines about myself, so I thought I'd bypass the prostitutes. There's no media here, there's no press here, there's no mainstream media. They're all taking photographs of someone who said something mean on Twitter. They're not here to find who these people are. They haven't followed these people. You know this lad who runs Generation Identity? I found out that the media had been harassing his family. Yeah? You want to harass someone's family? You see that man who was getting aggressive as he walked into court? The man who faces charges of child abduction, rape, prostitution. Harass him. Find him. Go knock on his door. Follow him. See where he works. See what he's doing. You want to stick pictures online and call people and slander people? How about you do it about them? Instead of doing it about someone speaking about him. Who knocks? That's what I said as well. Like, he doesn't even live with his parents. The young leader, he's 23 years old, doesn't even live with his parents. And do you know why I get quite frustrated about it? Because I know all the same things have happened to me. So I know what he's facing. I get quite angry because I just think his family are innocent, and they plastered the family's names all online. Why would you do that? They do that so that it causes... It's all disruption tactics. It's disruption tactics, and it's to disrupt your life and cause you maximum problems. So, for example, in the early years of my activism, I had my mum sitting down crying, begging me to stop. As I'm sure that young lad who I interviewed just yesterday or the day before, I'm sure his family have done the same now. And that's what they want them to do, which is why they've done it, which is why they highlight who they are, which is why they highlight where he worked, because he just lost his job. All of these things play a major part. It's all part of the operation from the far left to silence and stop people.
Was Tommy telling his followers to become vigilantes, or was he calling British journalists hypocrites? He was calling British journalists a bunch of hypocrites. How did the judges in his case and the journalists who reported on it present what he said? They claimed that he was telling his followers to become vigilantes. He wasn't. He obviously wasn't, and they know that. But don't denounce the media or you'll be thrown in jail. Do you see what's going on here? The media and the British government have been weaponized. If you have the wrong political position, police can throw you in jail and a judge can send you to prison without anything remotely resembling a trial by a jury of your peers. The media will then convince their gullible readers and viewers that you broke the law even when you haven't, in order to keep people from examining the case and realizing what's going on in Great Britain. Tommy's been sent to prison twice since last year for breaking absolutely no law whatsoever. He didn't come close to breaking a law. He didn't come within 1,000 miles of breaking a law. But he's sitting in a cell because he refuses to keep his mouth shut while little girls are drugged, raped, and pimped out in the name of an ideology that views them as utter garbage. Tommy has to do his time now. When he gets out, if he gets out, he needs to leave Great Britain, because a country that has become so morally bankrupt that it won't protect its children obviously isn't going to protect the rights of its citizens. So get out while you can.